How does a priest, forbidden to preach, become one of America's greatest evangelizers? What happens when failure becomes the doorway to God's greatest work? Why did 20,000 people weep at the funeral of a simple doorkeeper? This is the story of Blessed Solanus Casey, the failed student who couldn't pass his exams but opened heaven's door to thousands, proving that God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. The Wisconsin winter bit hard in 1878. Inside the Casey farmhouse, 16 children crowded around a worn table, their breath visible in the cold air. Bernard Francis Casey, the sixth child, quiet and strong, watched his younger siblings read aloud from their primers with ease. He squinted at his own book, the letters swimming before his eyes like confused black ants. His father, a lumberjack with hands like tree bark, looked up from sharpening his axe. "Bernard, your turn." The boy stumbled through the passage, each word a small defeat. It wasn't that he was slow. He could remember every tree in the forest, knew when storms were coming by the way the wind moved. But books? Books were mysteries written in a language his mind refused to speak. "He's a good boy," his mother would whisper to neighbors who asked why Bernard struggled in school. "He's got a different kind of smart." Her rosary beads clicked softly in her apron pocket, a sound like small prayers falling. The years passed. Bernard worked the lumber camps, his muscles growing strong as his confidence shrank. He became a hospital orderly, a streetcar operator, a prison guard watching other men suffering, learning compassion in the margins. Each job taught him something. Books never could. How to see people, really see them, the way God does. At 21, when most men his age were established in careers, Bernard felt an impossible pull, the priesthood. Him, the boy who couldn't learn? Friends laughed gently. Family worried quietly, but his mother's rosary kept clicking, and the call kept growing louder. "I'm not smart enough," he told the priest who interviewed him for seminary. The priest studied the calloused hands, the honest eyes. "Smart enough for what? God doesn't need your intelligence, Bernard. He needs your yes." But God was preparing a priest like no other, one whose weakness would become a window for miracles. The Latin echoed through St. Francis Seminary like a foreign song. Other seminarians conjugated verbs with ease, debated theology in flowing sentences. Bernard Francis Casey sat in the back row, his large frame hunched over texts he couldn't penetrate. The letters still swam. The concepts still slipped away like water through his fingers. "Casey, translate the passage." Silence. Heat rising to his face. The snickers of classmates who found it all so simple. His superiors met in quiet rooms, debating his future. "The vocation is clear," one said, tapping Bernard's file. "The capacity is unclear. We could dismiss him. Look at his service hours. Look at how the sick respond to him. There's something there." They found a compromise, a category that had existed in church law but was rarely used: simplex priest. He could be ordained, yes. He could say Mass, but he could not preach doctrinal sermons, could not hear confessions, could not exercise the full ministry of a priest. On July 24, 1904, Bernard Francis Casey became Father Solanus, a Capuchin friar. He knelt to receive the bishop's hands on his head, joy and shame mixing like oil and water in his heart. Around him, other new priests celebrated fully. He celebrated partially. His first assignment came swiftly: porter at the monastery. Doorkeeper, the man who answers when someone knocks. Father Solanus stood at the heavy wooden door, staring at the worn threshold. 7 years of seminary, years of struggle and prayer. And now he would open doors and take messages. A priest who couldn't fully be a priest. "Is this really it, Lord?" he whispered into the empty corridor. The door was silent, the future hidden. They had given him the lowest position in the monastery. Heaven had given him the widest door to souls. The knock came at dawn, then another, then a dozen more. Detroit, in the 1920s, was a city of smokestacks and desperation, factories running around the clock, families struggling to survive. They came to Street Bonaventure Monastery because someone had whispered, "There's a priest there. He listens, he prays, things happen." Father Solanus pulled open the heavy door to find a woman with a dying baby, a man with a cancer eating him alive, a teenager who'd lost all hope. He gestured them inside, his porter's desk becoming an altar of mercy. "Tell me," he said simply, sitting down across from the weeping mother. "My baby, the doctors say 3 days, maybe less. Her fever won't break. They've tried everything." The woman's hands shook as she held her bundled child. Father Solanus leaned forward, his worn habit smelling of incense and simple soap. "Let's do something together. Let's thank God ahead of time." "Thank Him? But she's dying." "Thank Him ahead of time for what He's going to do. And let me enroll you in the Seraphic Mass Association." He wrote her name carefully in the register, a ledger of hope. "Masses will be said for your intention. Now, let me bless your baby." His large hands, the hands of a lumberjack's son, traced a cross on the infant's burning forehead. He prayed simply, like a child talking to his father. The woman left, not sure whether to believe. 3 days later she returned, the baby pink-cheeked and giggling in her arms. "Father, the fever broke within hours. The doctor said they can't explain it. What did you do?" "I?" Father Solanus shook his head, his eyes twinkling. "I just prayed. God did the healing." But word spread like fire through Detroit streets. The doorkeeper who works miracles. The priest who knows. Lines formed before dawn. People waiting hours just to speak with a simple friar at his wooden desk. He sat there 8 hours, 10, sometimes 12, his back aching, his hands cramping from writing intentions in the ledger, but never too tired to listen. Never too busy to see the face of Christ in another broken heart. A factory worker. "My wife's been barren 15 years. Father Solanus. 15 years of preparation. Thank God ahead of time for the child he's preparing. 9 months later, twins. A businessman. My company's failing. I'll lose everything." Father Solanus. Everything? Or just the things you thought you needed? The business was saved. But more importantly, the man was saved from the idol of success into the arms of trust. The man who couldn't pass theology exams was teaching the city about God one broken heart at a time. She came on a Tuesday afternoon, this woman with expensive clothes and cheap hope. She sat across from Father Solanus at the porter's desk, ready to recite her rehearsed story. "Father, I need prayers for my son. He's very ill, and..." "Before we talk about your son," Father Solanus interrupted gently, "there's something else. Something you've been carrying for 20 years. A sin you confessed once, but never believed was truly forgiven." The woman's face went white. "How could you possibly? I never told anyone." "God shows me," he said simply, "not to shame you, but to free you. He forgave you the moment you confessed it. Now you must forgive yourself." She wept, and her son healed within the week. This became normal at the porter's desk. Impossible knowledge. Things Father Solanus couldn't know, but did. To a man about to leave. "Your brother in California needs you. Call him tonight." "My brother's fine. Call him." The call revealed a suicide attempt, interrupted just in time. To a mother, "Your daughter will recover on the 3rd day, at noon." 3 days later, at exactly noon, the girl's fever broke. Fellow friars watched in awe and confusion. How does he know these things? Father Solanus only shrugged. "I listen. God speaks. I'm just the doorkeeper. I let the messages through." But his greatest gift wasn't prophecy or healing. It was the way he looked at people. Factory workers and millionaires. Saints and sinners. He saw them all the same way. Beloved children of a Father who aches for them. A prostitute stumbled in one morning, drunk and desperate. Other visitors recoiled. Father Solanus stood, Pulled out a chair. Sit down, dear. Tell me what's happened. No. First tell me your name. God's been waiting to hear it. Complex problems. Simple solutions. Theological questions. Childlike answers. Father, how do I find peace? Thank God for everything. Even the hard things. Especially the hard things. Father, how do I know God's will? Do the next right thing with love. That's His will. Critics whispered, too simple, not theological enough. But the people kept coming. The blind saw. The lame walked. The despairing found hope. They came seeking miracles. They left having met mercy. At 4 a.m., while Detroit slept, Father Solanus knelt in the dark chapel. The Eucharist glowed in its golden vessel, the only light in the pre-dawn silence. His knees ached. His stomach, damaged by years of fasting, burned. His skin, afflicted with a painful dermatitis, itched and wept. He smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for this day. Thank you for the pain. Thank you for the privilege of serving." By 5 a.m., he was at his porter's desk. By 5:30, the first knock on the door. By noon, he'd seen 40 souls. By evening, 80. Each one received the same attention, the same love, as if they were the only person in the world. In the recreation room after dinner, he'd pull out his violin. The violin he played terribly, joyfully, making the other friars laugh and wince in equal measure. Music, he'd announce, sawing away at hymns that emerged mangled but enthusiastic. Father Solanus, a young friar, once asked, "Why do you play when you know you can't?" "Because it makes you smile," he said, "and making you smile makes me smile, and smiling together makes God smile. That's 3 smiles from one terrible song. Good mathematics, I think." His fame grew, but his humility deepened. Newspapers wrote about the miracle worker of Detroit. Radio programs wanted interviews. He refused them all. "I'm just the doorkeeper," he'd say, patching his worn brown habit for the 100th time. Just a doorkeeper. But those who lived with him saw the hidden life, the hours of prayer, the secret fasts, the way he offered every discomfort, every slight, every long day as a gift to God. Brother Leo, a fellow Capuchin, wrote in his journal, "I watched Father Solanus deal with an angry visitor today, a man who shouted, cursed, blamed him for unanswered prayers. Father just listened, nodded, then said gently, 'I understand your anger. God understands it too. Let's pray together.' The man left in tears, asking forgiveness. Father Solanus never mentioned it again, never complained, just thanked God for the opportunity to love someone difficult. His body was wearing out arthritis in his joints, eczema covering his skin, stomach problems from years of neglect. But the joy never dimmed. "Father, how can you be happy when you're in pain? Pain is just a feeling. Joy is a choice. I choose joy because I know God is good, even when I don't feel good." Someone once counted, in an average day, Father Solanus said thank God over 100 times. But the body that had served so many was beginning to fail. The dermatitis had spread, angry red patches covering his skin like a map of suffering. In 1956, at age 86, Father Solanus could barely stand. The doctors used a new word, cancer. His superiors transferred him back to Detroit to St. John Hospital for treatment. Even from his hospital bed, he continued his ministry. Visitors filled the hallways, waiting to see him, to receive one more blessing from the doorkeeper who'd opened heaven. A nurse found him one morning sitting up despite orders to rest, his hands folded in prayer. "Father, you should be lying down." "Can't pray lying down," he said with a wink. "Well, you can, but I like to kneel. Old habit." The pain increased. The treatments failed. July 1957 brought oppressive heat and the knowledge that time was ending. On July 30th, his fellow Capuchins gathered around his bed. His breathing had become labored, his voice weak. But when a brother asked if he was afraid, Father Solanus smiled. "Afraid? I've been answering doors my whole life. This is just the last one. The best one." His final words were gratitude. "I give my soul to Jesus Christ. Thank God. Thank God for everything." At 11 a.m. on July 31st, 1957, Father Solanus Casey stepped through the final door. The news spread through Detroit like a shockwave. The doorkeeper was gone. His body lay in state at Street Bonaventure Monastery. They expected a few hundred mourners. 20,000 came. They lined up for blocks, factory workers and housewives, businessmen and beggars, people he'd helped, and people who'd just heard the stories. They filed past for hours, many weeping, some reporting that touching his casket brought instant healing. A woman threw away her crutches at his funeral. A child's fever broke while standing near his coffin. The miracles he'd worked in life continued in death. They buried him in a simple grave, as humble in death as he'd been in life. But the line of pilgrims never stopped. 60 years later, on November 18, 2017, in a packed stadium in Detroit, Pope Francis declared, "Blessed Solanus Casey, the first American-born man to be beatified." The doorkeeper had finally received his title, not Doctor of the Church, but something better. Friend of the poor, healer of the broken, proof of God's power in weakness. The door he answered for 50 years finally opened for him into the arms of the God he had served so humbly. Today, thousands still visit Father Solanus Casey's tomb in Detroit. They come with the same desperate needs that brought people to his porter's desk: sick children, failing marriages, impossible situations. And still, the reports of miracles continue. His worn porter's desk is preserved under glass, a relic of the most powerful kind, not because it's ancient or ornate, but because it witnessed grace, transforming ordinary encounters into eternal moments. 21st century pilgrims stand before it, seeing not furniture but an altar where heaven touched earth through the simplest of ministries, listening. But Blessed Solanus Casey's greatest miracle isn't the healings or prophecies. It's the hope he offers to everyone who has ever felt inadequate, to every student who failed exams, every worker in a dead-end job, every person told they weren't smart enough, talented enough, important enough. He whispers across the decades, "God doesn't need your abilities, He needs your availability." The academic failure became a doctor of souls. The simplex priest, unable to preach, converted thousands. The man assigned to answer doors opened the gates of heaven. His life is a living gospel, proving that God's power truly is made perfect in weakness. In an age that measures worth by achievements and success by status, Father Solanus stands at his desk, smiling gently, reminding us that greatness is measured in cups of water given in hours of listening, in faithful presence. That the most powerful position isn't on a stage but at a threshold. That the most profound sermon isn't preached from a pulpit but lived from a doorkeeper's desk. His message echoes through every failure, every limitation, every moment we feel we're not enough. Thank God ahead of time. Thank Him for the rejection that redirects, for the failure that refines, for the weakness that makes room for His strength. The boy who couldn't learn taught America about grace. The priest who couldn't preach evangelized a generation. The doorkeeper opened heaven, not through brilliance, but through love. And his desk still stands, waiting. Because every one of us has a door to answer. Every life is a threshold where souls can meet mercy. We may not work miracles, but we can work love. We may not have prophecy, but we can have presence. Blessed Solanus Casey, failed student and faithful servant, proved that God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And He's calling still, to anyone willing to stand at their own ordinary door and answer with extraordinary love. The doorkeeper is watching, heaven is waiting. And all God asks is what Father Solanus gave, a grateful yes